Tanveer Mohammed Masood once again, and today I'm going to talk on another very important topic. It's basically about fashion. What exactly has this word, the concept of fashion, got to do in our life, in our cosmopolitan life of late, in our day-to-day life? How exactly and why exactly this term fashion is trying to play its part in our life? Now, before I go further with this concept of fashion, we need to find out what exactly and how exactly can we define this term of fashion. I thought fashion is basically the reflection of one's personality. This is a very short description and in a very simple description of the word fashion. It basically means that how a person, whether male or female, a guy or girl, tries to express himself by way of his or her dressing sense, and it's basically a reflection. It's basically a part of one's personality, that dress code that a person often tries to attire. Well, I thought the influence and pervasiveness of fashion depends and varies from culture to culture, from countries to countries, from nations to nations. It all has got to do with the sort of culture, the tradition a person has behind him or her, and it all gets expressed by the way he or she tries to attire and tries to dress himself or herself. Well, I thought that fashion was in there for a long time now. It's been in there for a long time. It was in there during the eras of the Mughals, during the periods of Cholas, the Mauryans, during the Roman Empire, during the rule of Alexander Archer in India. It was in there in every part of the world, and it all had got to do with the tradition and culture that was prevalent at that point of time. Since during the Mughal period, the Mughals were very fond of wearing those long gowns with turban, as well as shoes which were little pierced. We used to call them, or rather we call them these days, Niagara shoes. It used to be very pierced, and it looked like as if a king is basically made for such a shoe. And as far as turban is concerned, they used to make sure that they had their head covered with either a cap or a turban, or a very sophisticated turban that was prevalent during those era, and it was part of the culture, the tradition, to make sure that they are at the best when they go out, or when they are in the courtroom of the king, and whenever they try to mingle with each other, they used to make sure that they had their best clothing on their body, and that would always make sure that it's fashionable. When King Alexander the Great ruled India, and when he was in India or in any part of the world, he was rather he went out in quest of exploring a new land and new opportunities for his country. He always made sure that he wore a gown. For example, he always used to wear this skirt-like dress, and he used to make sure that he carried a sword. He used to wear a very sophisticated shoes, and that was the very important and very typical hallmark of the people of that period of time. During ancient period, people used to wear dhotis as well as a small piece of cloth on their body, and that was an important feature of their dressing sense, and it basically went on to show that they were basically very caddy sort loving sort of people, and they always used to make sure that they had this dhoti and a piece of cloth on their body. With the advent of British in India, the taste of our countrymen out here changed quite drastically. People out here started to wear suits or blazer or coat, we call it as commonly, and it became a hallmark of people in the sophisticated part of the society, and they always had to make sure that they were at the best whenever they met with their masters, or whenever they tried to mingle out with people in the higher strata of the society. This trend of wearing a suit, or if at times we call it blazer with trousers, that was basically started with the advent of British rulers out here, and with the advent of English people out here in India. As I said, there was a huge change in our dressing sense, and that was the commencement of a new era as far as our dressing and fashion sense was concerned. Wearing gown, a full gown with a turban is still prevalent in several parts of the Arab world in Middle East. People these days still wear those turban with a full gown that basically covers the entire part of their body with one complete piece of cloth, and that is basically the hallmark of their fashion and their dressing sense, and it's particularly prevalent in Saudi Arabia these days. In fact, it's been prevalent from the days of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they used to wear in our world a piece of full cloth. We used to, rather, we call that part, or that part of the cloth as one complete gown, and it's basically used to cover the entire part of one's body. This was the characteristics of the male dressing sense. As far as women are concerned, people out there are still trying to wear the same cloth. They are basically still the present day culture with their past culture, and these days women out there are still, rather, they are wearing burqas and veils that basically is much like the full gown of male dressing sense. It basically covers the entire part of their body, and it's basically we find that women are still preferring hijab. That is very good, mashallah, and that is very appreciable. And there, in fact, hijab and burqa has come of age. They are trying to modify. They are trying to experiment it with new features. They are trying to modify burqas, adding very beautiful and very wonderful colors on it, trying to modify it with these days trying to stitch, or rather they are trying to add shining objects on burqas and veils, and they are making very fashionable hijabs these days, and this has attracted the modern Muslim women in a very big way. They have gotten so much of attraction towards this modification that has brought in the hijab and burqa industry, if I could put it, that they are basically getting carried away. They are not trying to ape the other cultures. In fact, they are trying to add a Western concept in their past tradition, and trying to modify it and reinvent it in a big way, in a better way, and it's basically attracting the modern Muslim women who are basically more educated, who are basically sophisticated as well, and they're not trying to put their past tradition and culture behind. In fact, they are inventing and they are experimenting, and they are doing it in a big way, and they are basically attracting the attention from other parts of the world as well. Now, these days we have this fashion of wearing jeans, shirts, fashionable shirts, as well as t-shirts and trousers, which are basically very sophisticated in nature, shirts which are very sophisticated in nature, and it's basically catching the attention of every follower of every part, every culture, every tradition, no matter it's from west, east, north, or south. Any part of the world you go and see, you'll see that this culture of wearing jeans and trousers is still prevalent, and it doesn't really bother a person whether he comes from this culture or this tradition. It really doesn't matter because these days what exactly is happening is that people are not trying to bother. In fact, they are not trying to keep their culture behind. In fact, they are following the culture as well as adapting the present day culture, the present day trends, and trying to mingle the culture with the present day trends. Now, this has in fact gave a real boost to the fashion industry as well. I thought the way a person dresses himself or herself is all the more dependent on how comfortable and cozy he feels while wearing that set of cloth or that dress. For example, a person is quite bulky, quite fat, and very heavy as far as his or her weight is concerned. He would rather prefer to wear a very simple, rather very light cloth. For example, if a person is quite bulky, he would certainly go on to wear something which is in by way of a trouser or by way of a shirt that would get fitted to his body comfortably and that would not try to bother him or her when he is out or when he is in his or her office or when he is or sitting in his shop or any place of work. Women out here in India do prefer to wear saris as well. Saris that are the most comfortable way of putting oneself in a hustle and bustle of a particular metropolitan city or any part of the city which is basically very crowded because what exactly happens is that in the hustle and in the chaos of a very busy city, one has to really put up with all the literal hardship and without wearing saris would be the most appropriate way to put up with that literal hardship. Wearing salwar suit is also one of the most prevalent dress code that is in there in our subcontinent, in India, Pakistan, in Bangladesh as well. It's in there in Sri Lanka, in certain parts of Sri Lanka as well. It's in there because it's been in there for a long, long time. This salwar suit is basically very soothing to see. It's very pious, very as well. Well, people do wear lungis as well. Lungis is basically quite prevalent in amongst people out here in the subcontinent, in Sri Lanka, in India, in Bangladesh as well. There are basically lots of people who wear lungis, and it's basically a part of their culture and their tradition as well. At times, it's prevalent in South India as well. It's in the other parts of India as well. And we have a movie in Chennai Express wherein there is a lungi dance song that has been sung, and it quite goes on to show the popularity of this concept of wearing lungi out here in India and other parts of our subcontinent. Well, at the end of the day, what we find is that wearing a dress is in fact a reflection, a shortcut of towards a person's taste and distaste towards a particular piece of cloth or towards a particular set of cloth, and it basically reflects the image of a person, the personality of a person, and everyone, no matter it belongs to a particular set of religion, everyone wants to be at his best, and he should be at his best because this is what the dressing sense is all about. That there is a little bit of fashion. In fact, there is more fashion in our day-to-day life, and it's in fact it's a part and parcel of our life, to say the least, because from the very early hour of the day, from the early first part of the day, we make sure that we go out dressed quite in a good way, depending on the economy that we have, depending on our financial status and the background that we have. In fact, everybody wants to be at his best when he tries and mingles with his friends, his colleagues, or anyone that is in there in our society, in our day-to-day life. In fact, there are separate uniforms for soldiers, for army men, for Navy officers, for Air Force officers, for people who are serving the defense. They have got separate and very unique uniform for themselves, and that itself is the testimony of the fact that how deeply we are influenced and how deeply this concept of fashion has gotten in our life, and that is indeed very appreciable.